Thank you for tuning in to Mastering the Math of Business with Lauren Young. Today we're going to be discussing a financial ratio, and it's a ratio that I like because it shows you how well your assets are contributing to your sales. And it's called the total asset turnover ratio, and it's a measure of taking your net sales off of your P&L statement, dividing it by your total assets off your balance sheet, and you now have a turnover ratio. In other words, you're able to gauge how effective your assets are in helping you generate sales. So with that, let's just appreciate a couple of things. One is assets either contribute to sales or they don't. And if they don't, then that means you've got dead weight you're carrying in your business. And it's one thing if the assets are fully depreciated, because it's basically a zero value. But it's another thing if you've got liabilities tied to those assets. That's a real problem. In fact, think about it this way. You've got all of these assets that exist within a business. These come off the balance sheet, and these are the most common asset areas. And you divide that into your net sales, and that will tell you your total asset turnover ratio. So if this number here is greater than 1, then that tells you that your assets are contributing more than $1 to sales. If the asset's below 1, if this asset ratio is below 1, then your assets aren't carrying their full value in your sales processes. So with that, let's look at a narrative. Again, the key here is appreciating that assets exist to help you generate sales at a profit. And the most common challenge that small business owners face isn't the challenge of selling too much and struggling to keep up with those sales. The challenge is they're wanting to make more money, and a natural output for that is the requirement of more sales. And so they buy assets with the intention that those assets are going to help them generate higher sales. The challenge is when those assets don't generate the type of sales that was expected, then they become a real drain on the business, particularly on the cash if those assets are financed and they're having to pay debt against an asset that isn't helping to generate the sales sufficient to cover the costs of the asset. So with that, in this scenario here, you've got an asset base of 2.7 million and sales of 2.5 million. Right there off the surface, you know that ratio is going to be below 1. So let's appreciate how you can calculate the total asset turnover ratio for your business. You need two numbers. First one's off the P&L statement. That's your net sales. Second is off the balance sheet. That's your total assets. So you get those two numbers. And then if your goal is to move those numbers, there's only two levers you can pull. One is you can increase sales, and that will change your total asset turnover ratio, or you can decrease your asset base so that you have fewer assets sitting on your balance sheet that are intended to generate sales. In other words, you're freeing up cash by removing assets that aren't contributing to the business. That too is a very wise move. So let's look at the impact of either one of these decisions on this mix of sales and assets. So if you look at it from a sales perspective and you drop through it, you can see that picking up 20% in sales and going from 2.5 to 3 million without changing the asset base is going to take you now to $1.11 is the way to think about this. So you're going to pick up 19 points in your total asset turnover ratio by increasing sales by 20%. Now let's come over here on this equation and let's look at it from a change in the asset base. In other words, business steps back and says, you know what? I've got 20% of my assets that are never going to contribute to the sales that I need them to contribute. So you unload those assets. You remove them from the business, and you can see here that you actually get a 23-point bump by unloading 20% of this asset. And so now what you're doing is you're dividing this 2.5 million in sales by 2,160,000 in assets. The key is to appreciate that you need the top line. That's what drives everything in your business, and the assets that sit on your balance sheet exist to help you do that. So if you're a business that is struggling, one of the ways to take some of the struggle out is to make things more black and white. That's what financial ratios do, is they help you see your business in very black and white terms. There's no shades of gray to distract you, particularly if all you're doing is just doing the raw calculation. You're not putting any crazy assumptions or factors into it. So in this case, if your sales aren't where they need to be, one of the first areas you need to look at is your assets. Are your assets carrying their weight in the business? Yes or no? That's a black and white question. If you're struggling with this, go to business-cpr.com/P4. P4 will take you to the profit math of business. Here's all of the different financial ratios, the most commonly used in business. What data is needed to be able to calculate the ratio, the formula itself, and how it will help you see your business in new and different ways. Thanks again for tuning in to another edition of Mastering the Math of Business with Lauren Young. I welcome your comments and suggestions. I particularly encourage you to think in terms of this statement down here. If your assets aren't returning more than they cost, you have a management problem. And if that's the case, let me know what that problem is or what you think it is, and I'll show you the math to confirm that. Likes are always appreciated, so please share a like with me. Also, subscriptions enable you to stay abreast of the different thoughts and ideas that we're bringing forward to help you enjoy your business more with less stress. Thanks so much for tuning in. Goodbye.